And one of the things that he's going to talk to us tonight about is his painting of water on glass. So I'm going to turn it over to him. And I hope everyone enjoys it as much as I'm going to.
And just in preparation for James's presentation, if everybody could please mute themselves, and if you have questions, I'm sure James will let us know how he'd like to handle that. Well, everybody's just flopping around here. There we go. Yeah, there we are.
Hi, is it my turn now?
You're on.
Okay, well, I'm really excited to be here and just over the moon. So thank you very much for this. What I was saying in the breakout room about what I'd like to do tonight is I've got an image. I've got a painting that's ready for raindrops, and I've taken that painting and I've got another panel exactly the same size. So I'm just going to flip you around here and show you what I'm talking about. So here we are is my crowded little workshop. When I start with doing airbrushes tonight, like I've got basically the primary colors. So ultramarine blue, alizarin crimson, benzimidazolone yellow medium, raw sienna. Actually, I won't be using raw sienna that much because that's what I did the underpainting in, titanium white. And so basically, I'm just going to try and keep it limited to simple primary colors. This is what I've got to the point where it's ready for raindrops. What I'm going to do tonight is, as I said in the breakout room, I'm going to split it in half in that this is the underpainted one that's exactly the same size as this one. So I'm going to spend about half the time that I have, which is what would it be like about an hour and a half tonight?
Yeah.
Okay, so I figure I'll do about 45 minutes of airbrushing on this piece and just kind of try and bring it up to the colors that you see here. And then, so that will cover kind of the first part of my process. And then the second part of the process, I'm going to switch it over to oil painting. And this will be the basic palette that I use, which is flake white, cadmium lemon, cad red light, ultramarine blue, burnt umber, if I want to do anything really dark to mix with ultramarine, sap green, and phthalo green. So fairly limited palette. You can do a lot with a limited palette, as you know, I'm sure. So that's kind of it in a nutshell with what I'm going to do. Okay.
I do have one question, James. I've always wondered, your reference photo, are those from a dash cam?
No, they're just me holding the phone and driving.
Uh-oh.
Are there any cops here tonight?
Yeah, if anybody asks, you have a dash cam, right?
I have a dash cam, yeah, that's right. When, sorry, go ahead.
So were you out in the storm today, taking some photos?
No, I was safely inside. I just kind of glanced up out the window and saw it coming down. I wasn't near the studio, unfortunately, so or driving or anything, able to take any pictures. So I'm sure there probably would have been some good ones.
Yeah, I kind of imagine you as a storm chaser.
Yeah, in a way, I'm sort of right in the middle of it, right? Really, when it comes time to photographing this stuff, it's pretty much right in the middle of it. I'll show you the source photo that I'm going to be working from. So this was one I snapped a couple of years ago, I think, when I was out, probably when working out Salmon Arm, driving early one morning. So it's kind of an early morning shot. And so I'm just gonna basically, like I said, I'll get started here with the airbrush and show you what I'm gonna do. So actually, the other color I would like to use in conjunction with the primaries is Sap Green, which is kind of a nice ready-made dark green color to go on. And where did I put it? Sorry. I think it's over here. So I keep quite a few different tubes of color. It's nice to have different ones for accents and things. But like I say, the basic primaries are good to have. I'm just gonna bring these guys over. Okay. All right, so let's get started. Now this is the airbrush that I'm using, which is it's called an Iwata Eclipse Hpcs. It's just a particular model that I use. It's a great workhorse, honestly, for an airbrush. It covers a lot of ground. Like I worked up to 48 by 72 canvases on it, and it blasts a nice wide fan onto the canvas, like a good 2 inches, which is a lot of ground you can cover. I've been learning a lot about airbrushing since my airbrush broke. Maybe realizing that I've done a few things maybe I could have done differently. Not that it led up to breaking it. That's my foot caught the cord and pulled it out of its cage, and it not landed on its needle on the ground, but that's another story. So this is called a reducer, and that is basically just it's something that goes into the cup first. So I'm going to go ahead and pour a little bit into the cup. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
Okay. So the reducer, it's just it sort of prevents the machine from getting too clogged up, because acrylic paint, how it cakes up and stuff, right? So that's basically what happens with golden high flow in the guts of the machine. It really tends to clog up pretty good. But I find that the reducer prevents a lot of that from happening. So I'm going to get started here and work. I'm going to start working the dark areas. So I'll go with a bit of Sap Green. And it doesn't come out very easily. So I've got a little tool for that I use. This is a tool that I use. It's a little poker on the end of it. And I just kind of poke right into the nozzle of the thing, and just go down in there.
And these are high flows, right?
Yeah, these are high flows. I'd actually, I'd like to mention one other thing about surface preparation that I do. I use a product for my ground. I use something called Sure Step, and that's available at Benjamin Moore, and it's actually designed to go around the floor around swimming pools. And so what it does is you roll it on basically, and it's like what it is. It's basically like paint and sand mixed together. Like there's a high degree of sand. It's very, very granular. So if I hold this like that, can you see the texture on the surface?
Just hold it very still for a minute. Ah, yeah, there we go.
You can see that? So
Wow.
That's what I like about it. It's porous too. It's almost like stucco. And I really like a textured surface like stucco. I like to alter my canvases and panels that way so that they have a nice gritty surface. And for me, that serves a couple of purposes. It helps the paint soak in quite effectively. And I believe that there's more durability to it. I really like the toughness of the surface. Like I do it even on canvases, like on the big deep canvases that you can get. I find it really gives it a nice, it just gives it more substantial surface, I think, to have. So as I said, it's like a roll-on product. I basically get a 4-inch roller and just roll that product right on there and let it dry. I've even tried it sometimes where you roll it on and have a cup of color ready, and you can literally spray it while it's still wet. And I believe that even makes a better bond because it soaks in while it's wet, and it's like tattooing wet plaster. It goes right in, and I think it has more holding power. So I'm going to try it again here with my Sap Green, and hopefully that little persuasion worked. Yeah, there it is. So a few drops of that. And just to kind of take the pure green out of it, I'll kind of modify it a little bit with some ultramarine blue. I don't need a lot. That might have been too much. my brush around here somewhere. I'll just use one of these guys again. Oh, there it is. Got a little mixing brush that I use. I always just hold this between my teeth. It's just handy to grab. And then you just kind of mix the colors as you're going. And there's a bit of a process in between colors. Like I try and judge how much I need so that I can just, by the time I've covered the area that I need to cover on the picture, I'll be spraying it dry, like I'll be done. So let's just try this and see where we're at. So we're gonna, hopefully this is a good angle. There it is. Now this is called a dual action. I should mention a couple of basics about the airbrush. This is a dual action. So that means this is one action, spraying, pushing the trigger on the gun goes straight down. That releases the airflow through the hose out the nozzle. And then when I push it down and pull it back, that's the second action. That releases the paint from the gun or cup into the airflow and dispenses it out of the nozzle. So it's 1, 2.
Oh.
So that's a dual action is what they call it. And the great thing about it is, like at work, sometimes I'll use what's called an airless spray system, which is what they use to spray houses and buildings. And it's a very clumsy, like by comparison, you don't have any control on the trigger. This, you have a lot of control. You can pull it back as little as you like and have just a little tiny dot if you want, right? Or if you want a broader spray, you pull it back for a wider fan width, and for a narrower, you go in closer. But, you know, for me, I really love the airbrush because it's just been a game changer for me. Like can everybody hear me over the compressor?
Well, it's funny because Zoom has decided that the sound of your compressor is background noise. So it's blocking that out, but we're actually getting your voice okay.
That's good. Okay, well, it's actually, Zoom is working in my favor, actually. That's good. So I'm, like I said, I mixed a bit of ultramarine blue in with the sap green to kind of take the tanginess out of that color. I love sap green, but by itself, I find it can be pretty, well, for lack of a better word, can be kind of tangy. So I'm just, I've undersprayed everything here a few days ago in raw sienna, just to kind of block in the basic values, the patterns of lights and darks. And then, so now I'm just gonna basically glaze color over top of it. What I really like about the airbrush is, of course, the softness and just watching a color appear before my eyes. It's sort of like, it's like a new thing that I've just loved. Like, you know, I thought that for me, it used to be with brushes, there was nothing like the sound or feel of a brush dragging across the canvas, but now it's actually spraying a surface. It's really something I really love to do. So I'm just gonna try and keep judging how much I got. Still have a fair bit left in there for a small picture, and I can go ahead and tint a lot of areas with bits of green as I go. Like that corner is a bit of a darker value, so I'll start putting in a little heavier on the green there. And it's going to be a pure chroma because it's basically more white under this area. It's less raw sienna to make it yellowy green. It's more pure that way. If you have any questions, just let me know as I'm going along. Again, the values are kind of doing the work, I find. Like the laying down the underpainting, I really like to do that process. It's sort of like, it's kind of like a map, a road map for me of my patterns of darks and lights. And it's, you know, just sort of a rough beginning that that can be refined as I go. A lot of green on this side, so I'm just gonna probably, oh, look at that, I'm almost out. That was probably that worked out pretty good, actually.
So I noticed, James, you're not using a spray booth or a fan or ventilation of any sort.
No.
You don't have excess spray, overspray or anything?
I do get some overspray. It tends to clog up on things, on surfaces, on the countertops. I've got everything over around it in front of my spray pattern. I've got everything draped in plastic. I've shrouded a lot of things in here. I should probably use a mask. I just don't have access to one right now, but I will. I do try and keep the door open as much as I can, especially when I'm working on big canvases. I definitely use a mask because it's like a cloud in here when I'm finished. Like it does really, you know, you really have to use proper PPE is a good thing. Says the man with no mask. So I'm going to give this a quick wipe out with a cloth. And that worked out pretty well. Actually, that kind of gives me a good idea of how much I used, how much I'll need for the next application. So this is called the Airbrush Cleaner. It's water-based, and it's got the code numbers on here. These are all available at Opus. As you know, the golden high flows are available at Opus. I'm just going to pour a little bit in here, and I just give the cup a clean out, usually like that, or with a cloth, whichever. Try and get the worst of it off the sides. There is a cap that I've got floating around somewhere that I usually put on here, especially when I get a lot of heavy pigment, like titanium white is quite heavily pigmented. Raw siennas especially tends to clog. So those types of things I'll use with a lot of reducer, and I'll give it a wipe out, get the worst of it out. So that's basically the bottom of the cup that's dirty at the end of it. And then I just basically spray the cleaner into a rag. And you can see it drains away quite quickly. So you can do it once or twice, but Sap Green's usually not too bad in my experience as far as clogging up the gun. So usually one wash through is good. I'm going to work on the sky color. And so for the sky color, I am going to start with some titanium white. Got to give these a shake because the pigments tend to settle, as you probably know. To those of you that use high flow, you have to give it a pretty good shake up before you use it. Oh, and I almost forgot my reducer, especially with titanium. I recently discovered a place in Edmonton that's called Maple Airbrush Supply. So if anybody's ever considering getting into airbrushing, the people at Opus are great. They've been were helpful, especially when things were going sideways when I was trying to get spare parts and everything. And even Iwata was good too. Iwata, the company that makes these, they suggested talk to Maple in Edmonton. So Maple is really good. They got my parts down to me in less than a week when Iwata said that it was going to take until right about now for them to even get the parts in their factory down in Portland, and then another 6 to 8 weeks to get the parts up here. So I was like, no, thank you. So it worked out anyways. For this sky, I'm going to use just a hint of actually a little bit of phthalo blue to kind of do that, try and get that sort of aquamarine color. Just a little bit, like basically one drop, because it's, as you know, phthalo blue is a very, very powerful tinting agent. Get some more white in there. I'll probably need a little bit more because I'm covering a bit more area with the sky, maybe even down into the road a little bit. A little bit of ultramarine, just to kind of warm up the thing a little bit. Let's mix these together. It's a lot of trial and error when it comes to mixing. As you know, trial and error is, well, it's just a way of really just trusting the process and having fun with it, really. I think that's probably a pretty good approximation. So let's just spray it on and see. It'll dry quickly, and acrylics, as you know, tend to darken once you've applied them. So I'm just going to make sure all the previous color is out of the gun. Yep, looking pretty good. You can always adjust as you go, you know, I can always, if it's too dark, then I can always add some white to it, or even you can literally take a pure color and throw a little bit in here and literally glaze over it with a light spray, like say pure ultramarine blue. You know, if you want to really punch something up and really really change it to your needs. Let's try. What I like about the airbrush is the softness and the effect of the soft focus. What I've been exploring with the Rain series for a long time is I've got this fascination for out of focus versus sharp focus. So that's the whole idea, the whole premise behind the water on glass is that, you know, the effect of a telephoto lens when you can only look at one object, or your eyes do the same thing. Our eyes do the same thing where you can focus in on one object up close at the expense of everything behind it being blurred. So I've been working on that technique for the last about 12 years, and at first blending with oils, and that was really laborious, and it took a long time to work on one painting. It was building up stuff and blending it out with the brush that really I found kind of slowed things down for me. So really getting into the airbrush I found was really quite a game changer as far as the process went, and then I could achieve the same effect in a fraction of the time. And you know, oils for me, they were a bit of getting used to again. When my airbrush broke down, I was getting back into the oils and brushing, and I was getting headaches and from the solvents, I think. So it was a bit of an adjustment getting used to those again. Just gonna put a shot of blue here and there down on the road. And again, this is all subject to change, so I'm just kind of laying in just the first application here. And you know, the wonderful thing is all this stuff's going to be dry by the time I finish blabbing here. It's going to be good to go for the next thing. Sometimes, like, what I like to do is, not that this worked out that I have too much of a color really, but if I end up with too much of a color, I like to somehow recycle it, you know, and just say if I got, okay, this is a light blue, say maybe I need a light green in the picture somewhere, so I'll use the existing light blue and throw some color into the leftover mix that I got, and try and just try and keep it going. You know, I hate wasting paint. I've always have. So I like to try and find ways to get the most mileage that I can out of the paint that I mix up. Really, because it's so damn expensive too, right?
What's your percentage of reducer that you use?
Well, I try and do about 10% approximately. It's really hard to say what percentage it would be with such a small quantity that I'm using in here. But if I've got this cup about, say this cup is about a quarter full or a third full, I'll put about a little less than half reducer in there. So it's always less than 50%. But I've only really started using reducers, so I'm kind of in the experimental stage with it. And I would say, you know, it's something you could play with, and the more reducer you put into this, the more transparent your painting is going to be. I would say by rule of thumb, and the less, of course, the more opaque it's going to be. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Would the reducer, James, be kind of equivalent to like a medium that we would
Yes.
use when glazing or something?
Yes, yes, it would, exactly. You know, the whole time I was actually using, I was using my airbrush cleaner as a reducer for a while. So it just goes to show, you know, follow directions. Yeah, I think you get better results when you follow the manufacturer's recommendations. So I'm really trying to do that now.
I love watching it emerge.
Yeah, it's fun to see it appear before my eyes. That's what I like about spraying. I'm not really going to worry about creating any sharp edges, because that's the whole point, is everything in the background I want to be blurry and soft, so that it maximizes the contrast with the raindrops, which I'll be doing in the second half of the time that I have.
You're going to sell a lot of rain photos in Vancouver.
We'll make some happy little trees here.
Yeah.
Happy accidents. That's what happens. Anyways, you get happy accidents. So it's time. I've run out here. I'll just make sure that I've blasted out the worst of it. Go in there with a cloth and just kind of wipe the sides of the cup. Try and get the worst of it out, so that I don't have to use too much cleaner.
So every time you change colors, James, you have to clean it out?
Typically I do. If I get into a real kind of a rhythm or a frenzy, sometimes I'll just keep feeding the paint in.
Mhm.
I don't try to do that too often, because it does gum up inside there. And I'm not really going to get into any cleaning to demonstrate that tonight, unless there's time left over and people want to see how you clean it. I don't mind doing that. I can tell you though, cleaning is a regular part of the process. It's just something you'd have to do. Otherwise you won't be spraying for very long. Probably one more shot of the cleaner here. Just a quick swish. That cleans my brush too while I go through there. It's just an old point brush, like a little round brush that I use it's kind of gotten damaged, so I've just changed it into my cleaning brush. Good to have one all the time. It's good to have all your tools kind of close at hand. Like the ones that I use most, of course, is the cleaning brush is one, and the little poker tool. That's another one that I keep close at hand for, you know, I just want to keep the flow going as much as I can. So I'm gonna get into a bit of the purple color for the top of the picture. So that'll be mostly ultramarine. Producer.
So is that a wooden panel or a canvas?
These are both wooden panels.
Okay, yeah.
Got them at Opus. They're 1.5-inch cradle panels.
But do you do something to them in the first place other than
Yeah.
the texturing?
I either use like an oil primer that kind of seals the tannins in the wood, or gesso, but I like to put oil primer down first and let it dry, and then I'll put gesso on top of that and give it a little light sand. And then on the gesso, I'll put the Sure Step, roll it on there and let it dry. So usually 2 or 3 steps when preparing the ground. Like I say, I like to modify the surfaces and really pay attention to the texture. And I like this kind of a texture. So I find that the priming and the Sure Step in conjunction work really well together for me.
What is oil primer? Is it oil based or is it acrylic?
It's oil based. So it's like
And you can paint on acrylic on top of it?
you can paint because it's a primer, and yeah, with a primer it's meant to hold undercoating. So when I worked at the school district, we would have a lot of old wood, and some of it was bare, like old windows and stuff like that. So we would paint oil primer on there first as an undercoat, so it would seal off the wood, and then on top of that we would put our top coat in acrylics. So it's really I find it's the same principle. It works well. I haven't had any problems with it. So I did oil primer and then gesso, which in itself it's another really strong primer. It's a bonder. So it's hard to get off, like, try washing it off your hands, right?
Right.
So in conjunction, I found those two things worked quite well.
Wow, I never knew that. That's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah. It's just something I adopted from working out at school district, and it's called the primer is called Fresh Start. I got it from Benjamin Moore. I found it was a really good tough primer.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I've got some ultramarine, and I'm gonna put just a dash of alizarin crimson in there. This one really tends to clog, so I don't know if I'm gonna be careful with alizarin crimson. It's a very strong tinting color, as you know. Just try a little persuasion. Just barely 1 drop. Even just if I can squeeze out half a drop. Come on. All right. There. There we go, just a little bit. And titanium. A couple of drops, or we'll say 3. Oops. That's okay, I'm gonna paint over that. I get quite a bit of spillages like that. Like when I'm working on big canvases on the easel, and sometimes I'm just spraying away and I forget to have the lid on, and then I'll look later on and there'll be all these vertical droplets on the bottom. I'm like, oh. That's why it's kind of a good idea to start at the top of the picture and work your way down if you're doing it all in airbrush. Let's try this. Kind of thinking rivulets right now, sort of like, patterns on the window. So when I try and make my marks to reflect that sort of flowing kind of a feeling, right? Not always trying to fill in the solid colors. I'm I try and think of it like gesture drawing, like really loose sometimes. I find that's what's really fun about airbrushing is like just going away, just going to town and spraying away. So you can kind of see the lines you can get. Like you can really have fun with it, you know, like kind of play around with it. And keep an eye on my mix to see how much I have left. I always try and keep half an eye out for how much is in there. Just kind of trying to judge what you have that you know you can use. I'm going to throw a little bit of purple in here close by to what's going to be a lot of orange in here. So I want to try and play around, play with the color wheel a little bit. Sort of an effect from the original photo. There was sort of an effect of rushing by, foliage rushing by as I'm driving, right? I liked in the original photo that there was sort of you can kind of see it on the top left corner, there was sort of that blurred rushing by effect that I liked. So I thought, you know, that try and capture that a little bit. Now, it doesn't matter if it's the wrong color right now. I'm just trying to think lights and darks. So, you know, again, a lot of this can be subject to change. You know, it's easy enough to change the hue of a color. You know, I find establishing the values, the darks and the lights, is really important, and not so much what the correct color is. After, like, it's really easy to kind of tint a value or a form later. Leave this alone right now because that's going to be a really hot color, oranges and reds in there. So trying to sort of roughly map out where everything's going to be. Try and just kind of go all over with color as I have whatever I have left. And you see what I've applied up here, it actually is lightened a little bit, so I can go back in and punch it a little bit more to make it a little darker. Play with the marks. Sometimes I blast off a little bit like that because I find that the tip can get clogged with paint around where the needle is. I'm just gonna show you. Can I quickly show you what the needle looks like?
Sure.
So you take off the back end. I used to keep this off all the time because I found I was cleaning the needle quite often, but I find I don't need to take it off as much. So it's if I'd have had this on here, when it had fallen, it would have protected the needle and this guide from getting broken. Anyways, hindsight. So this is called a chucking guide right here. It's a chuck that tightens and loosens, right? So that's tight and that's loose counterclockwise. So I've loosened it and pulled the needle out. And you can see that it's a little bit clogged with color. I'm just going to put the gun back in its holster for a second. Before I plug in, I'm going to unplug. I'm going to quickly clean out the airbrush. Everybody there?
Yeah,
Okay. So I'm just going to spray out the rest of this color. Just you. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Oh, the needle. Forgot to put the needle back in. I was going to show you how to clean it. What I was going to show you is just basically just a little bit of cleaner in the hand, on the palm, and then just, I didn't mean to do that. You always pull the needle away from yourself.
oh.
And
It's sharp,
I
is
just
it?
kind of wipe it. Yeah, it's quite sharp. And yeah, that's just part of the deep clean process. The deep clean process involves taking off this front part, this cup over the nozzle. The nozzle's inside here, so that comes out. And then you have to clean out the nozzle with really, like an old needle actually works well. And it's amazing what comes out, like a plug of dried acrylic comes out of there. And it makes all the difference by cleaning that out. So that's back together. I'm going to quickly spray this color out, give this a clean out, shut this down and unplug it. And then I can plug my phone in and make sure that I'm still transmitting while it's charging. I don't know. Sometimes these phones do weird things when you're plugged in. So I'll find out in a second. Worst case scenario, I can switch to plan B. I've got my other phone that I can sign into the meeting with. And it's got a pretty near full charge. So worst case scenario, I'm covered. Just going to spray the rest out because I don't really need it so much anymore. Put a little bit more on the top. That worked. A little bit of cleaner. And now there is something on the actual compressor that I was going to show you. What happens is that there's condensation builds up on a compressor when you use it, and every so often you have to relieve the condensation that builds up in the machine. So there is a neat little area, a neat little cylinder that I have here, and I'll just quickly show you. So right underneath that rag, right there. Sorry for jostling around. I'll try not to. There's a dial, and just turn it. Not actually wet, so that's good. When I do a heavy spraying, like if I'm at it for a good solid hour of spraying, what happens is condensation will build up in the machine there and collect in that trap. So you have to relieve that every so often. Another part of the maintenance. So I'm going to switch that off, bleed off the pressure, and then that's that's not finished. Obviously, I didn't get as far as I'd hoped, but that's okay. It kind of shows the first part of my process anyways that I've been working on. So now plug in the charger and hope that this will work okay while it's charging. Can you hear me?
We're good.
Okay, that's good. That's good. It's not doing funny things. Okay, so I will switch over to oils then. This is my palette that I'm working on. It's quite, I try to keep it organized, cool colors, warm colors over here, and white. I've been working on a picture that's very involved, mixing a lot with the primary colors and a lot of different mixing going on. So my palette's usually not this disorganized looking, but it's been right into this one particular picture that's really consumed me for the last month. I'm gonna just move some of this stuff out of the way. My acrylics. And now I'm gonna pick a brush. So I think I'll just kind of go with a couple of fairly small brushes for doing it because it's a small picture. And I'll just show you what I like to use for my medium. So I use solvable mineral spirits. You get it as a massive quantity. This lasts for a long time, and it's under $10 just at a paint store or hardware store. Any place like that will carry it. And then I'll use Gelkid. So about 50-50 mix with these two. And then that'll give me a medium that I usually keep in a couple of cups around here. I'm going to move these paints back out of the way that I was showing you earlier on in the presentation, all these tubes, because they don't need to be here. They're kind of in the way, but I'm just going to recharge the medium right now. I actually try and keep my I like to try and keep my colors organized now. I watched a video presentation of this one artist. I wish I could remember his name, but it was such a great idea. Like he said, like he basically has all of his colors going by temperature. So, and by darkness, right? So basically by the color wheel. So at one end of it, it's the phthalo green, which goes into the phthalo blues, and then over into the warmer ultramarine blues, and then the purples, and then the dark reds, and the orange reds, the oranges, and the orangey yellows, and the lemon yellows, and finally the whites. So I thought, like, his analogy was that of a piano player that knows where his keys are. Every time he goes to play Bach, he knows which keys to press. He's in that flow. So to his analogy was that by keeping his colors arranged a certain way on his table and also arranged a certain way on his palette, that it's like his keys. He goes right to where his colors are. He knows exactly where they are on the palette. And I thought, geez, like, why didn't I think of that 20 years ago? That's just so smart. Yeah, so I just loaded up with some flake white, and which is a substitute for lead white, as you probably know. It's a lot safer. I'm just going to use a glove. I don't like getting oils on my hands anymore. It's just so hard to clean off, so I use a glove. Got a rag. So can everybody see this layout okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I've got on my palette is ultramarine blue, sap green, burnt umber, alizarin crimson, lemon yellow, and flake white. And this is phthalo green. So I'll probably use just a little bit of phthalo. I'm going to start working some of these droplets up here. I'll work into the sky. So I'm going to work with start by working with phthalo. And it's really, when it comes to doing the droplets, I find you want to consider your background, right? You want to consider what do you have going on in behind it. You know, for example, if you have a sky that's this color, I like to mix up a value of a droplet for the sky that's slightly going to be slightly lighter. That's actually pretty good. Okay, so now I've done a mixture of flake white with a little bit of that phthalo green, because the sky is kind of a phthalo family of color. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm just mixed up a little batch here, about the size of a toonie, just enough to kind of keep me going, and having a fair amount of generous amount of medium on my brush. I'm, you know, be generous with it, keep it flowing, you know, wettability, right? And then I'm thinking about values too, right? See how that pops quite a lot as opposed to being down here. Like when it comes to doing these droplets, it's like, you know, the thought is like where to put the droplets, what size to do them. There's sort of a rhythm to them. You know, when I'm translating what I'm working from, I want to think about, it's really the picture is really what's important more than the source photo. So I'm not always going exactly by the source photo after a while. As you probably know, you try and sort of think about the design of the picture after a while. The source photo is more like a springboard. And so that's what I want to do here is, so the thing to think about with raindrops, what are they? They're transparent. So you see through them, right? So you're seeing, these are like little droplets, are like little magnifying glasses for color, right? So you see the slightly distorted sky color through it. So you're trying to be sympathetic to the form that the droplet is between you and the representation of the tree, for example. So what I do is I'll bring some of the sky color down into the tree line, but that's quite light, so I'm going to darken it. And a way to darken it quickly, as you know, is ultramarine blue. Like that is a real workhorse of a color, as you know. So what I found in my own explorations recently is I want to lighten some or darken something really quickly. I throw a bunch of ultramarine blue into the color. It takes it way down, but then what if the color that you want isn't blue? What if it's green? Well, I take Sap Green, which is, it's strong enough of a color, I find, that it changes the hue from blues to greens, but it keeps that level of dark that I've made that color with blue. You know what I mean? That's pretty light. So I'm going to throw quite a bit more of ultramarine blue into my mix.
So had you already done one layer? It seems like there's dots on there already, drops.
Yeah, and actually a lot of these dots that you're seeing are actually ones that I sketched in with the airbrush. So I just went all over the place. And I like to do that when I'm doing these ones, that it kind of maps out the pattern that I want to do. So by spraying it first, it's sort of a rough kind of approximation. It's not necessarily written in stone. Like those drops that I spray on there don't necessarily have to stick around. Like I can get rid of them if I want to. Now you see I've darkened it. And the thing about it is that they have to have sharp edges, because everything behind them is quite soft and not sharp. So by contrast, like a telephoto lens on a camera, if you do an object with very sharp found edges in front of lost edges, you're going to get a push-pull thing happening, right? Where you're getting a lot more dynamics between distance and something that appears closer to your eye. So try and balance things a little bit. Think about my color distribution, where I'm going to put certain colors. And then what I like to do here is just, because this color is going to be too dark if I put it into the sky, I'm going to add a little bit, put a little bit of white next to this mixture I've got. And I want to just see what it looks like when I do the top of the droplet. When you look at the top of a droplet, you see? See how it starts to kind of pop out? And that to me is just the right value. It's not too dark and it's not too wishy-washy. You want to have it, you want the value just to be right, just right. So again, that's where playing around with ultramarine blue is great. Like, it's such a workhorse in it. It will quickly darken something, and then I can neutralize that. If it's too blue, I can neutralize it with, say, a burnt umber to make it grayer, or it's complementary to make it more of a warm gray. The options are there, right? Is that making sense so far?
Could you hold it a little closer to the camera so we could see it?
How's that?
Yeah, that helps.
Oh,
Yes,
there you
thank you.
Welcome. So then I'm going to go up into the violets. And again, I want a similar value as what I've just put on. So now that there's violets, I'm going to add some flake white to the to my alizarin crimson, and a little bit of blue to knock down that. You know how strong alizarin crimson is when it's alizarin and white. It's that real pink, really strong pink, which I don't want too strong of a pink. I want to kind of, and then maybe purple might be a little too purple. So what I can do is take the complementary and add a little bit of just a tinge of the yellow to kind of neutralize it into a kind of a purpley gray color. And then that's still a little dark, so I'm going to knock that down with some white. And then I'm going to go in at the top here and try it. And I'm going to keep adding some medium to my mixture, because this is a rough surface. So having a good mixture with medium like that really helps.
James, why do you use oil instead of acrylic for this process, this part?
Because I find that oils kind of suits me, that it's slower. It doesn't dry so fast, and there's the feeling of oil. Like, I like the feeling of oil on the brush and how it glides across the surface. Just kind of a personal preference.
And maybe because it doesn't get darker, right, when it dries?
Yeah, that's the other thing. Oils are pretty much what you see is what you get.
Right.
And I find it sort of hard to continually second guess and say, okay, I got to make this lighter because it's going to go too dark. So I have to compensate. So I find that process is a bit hard for me. I just prefer one less distraction. So for me, oils is forgiving that way. That's why I like to work with oils.
So do you varnish after, and what do you varnish with?
I varnish usually with Kmart varnish, but I did actually pick up some Gamvar. I'm going to give that a try and see how it looks. So I've to this point, I've always just kind of used Kmart varnish mainly, especially with big canvases. I found it's easier just to get it all covered with with the spray then, and take it outside and spray it, of course, then rather than you know, using up these containers of Gamvar. I just find right now it's a faster process to do.
Right.
It dries quicker, I think.
Can
And
you
then-
spray outside in the winter with that, or?
I go outside if it's nice. I will go outside. I've actually there have been the occasional time where I've sent pictures unvarnished, just as is. I figure, you know, that the color is embedded. Like if you're looking at a cross section of the surface, it would be under a microscope quite jagged, so that there's recesses and for the color to sit into and kind of be protected by cast shadows of the texture itself. So I found sometimes that, you know, if I don't have time to varnish it, it's not necessarily the end of the world.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But I mean, under ideal circumstances, it's probably a good idea to varnish. And sometimes I want to think about movement of the droplets too. Like, you know, there's kind of a movement happening here where I'm driving and, you know, the droplets are sometimes moved by the wind, right? So they have a certain shape. I'm doing it fairly basic here, just kind of doing droplets that are just sitting on the surface of the glass, just to kind of give you an idea of the basic principles of optics that I'm trying to use here.
Well,
So
we
I'm
all hope at least you sometimes turn on the wipers.
Yeah, well, it makes for safer driving conditions. I'm just going to take some.
James?
Pardon? Yeah.
James,
Yes.
how do you deal with your edges?
My edges. You mean like?
Your side edges, yes.
Oh well, what you're looking at here is Fresh Start primer, and I
Yeah,
had it tinted gray.
right?
But what I do is I just do a couple of coats of gesso, essential gesso from Opus.
Yeah,
I just, yeah, I'll take sometimes depending on what I have, I'll use a cutting brush that they use for house painting. If I have a big canvas to cover, a 2-inch cutting brush works great. You just kind of cut down the side with it.
so you don't carry your image over the edge.
No, I don't usually.
Okay,
It's too much time really for me. I don't have that much time.
right.
I always seem to be fighting the clock. I don't know what it is. It's like there's barely enough time to just get the one front part finished, let alone the sides.
Do you use black gesso or do you paint it light? Your
I
edges?
always paint it light. I've been painting it white. The gallery down in Vancouver, Kurbatoff Gallery, they like to have their painters do their edges white, so I just paint them white.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
a nice clean effect. The image kind of floats off of a white wall. It's kind of a neat effect. So I'm just trying to lighten this value up a little bit, just to make it pop just a little more. Can everybody see that okay?
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay. Don't want to go too light because then it just looks like it's sitting above the surface. But then if you go too dark, there's not enough contrast between the shadow that goes over the top of the droplet. It's kind of been interesting learning about the anatomy of raindrops and what they do on a windshield and what they look like. Because if you look at the ones up here, all the shadows are on the top of the droplets, on the top of the rim, if you want to call it that. And then when you get down here, when you get down closer to the ground, I'm going to switch gears here and show you what I mean. I'm just going to hold this here so you can see the reference that I'm working from. Now I'm going to go into the green down here and work a little bit of the green. So I'll just grab some pure sap green here, put that into the middle of my mixing area. And I'm going to take a little bit of alizarin crimson, it's complementary color. And I like to work with sap green and alizarin together. They make a nice dynamic dark color, rich, earthy kind of a tone. So I'm going to put some right down here. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And it'll kind of overlap into the darker areas here. And then sometimes what you get on these droplets on the other side is an opposing dark side. And so I'll literally leave the background to show through. So it's the exact color. And when your eye kind of finishes it, see? Without having to make a complete circle, it kind of leaves it to the imagination a little bit. And then around it, I'll do little droplets because that's what rain's like. You have a whole, your windshield is full of a whole mixture of small droplets and big droplets and everything in between. So I'll make a few of those. They're kind of like again, I try and think about movement. What are the drops doing for the picture? You know, the movement of the droplets is important, and their composition, like what are they doing on the picture? Are they serving it overall, right? That's kind of the bigger question is like, what is each individual droplet that I'm putting on there doing? Is it serving a purpose or not? So I try and keep that in mind. When I get over to the middle part here, and you'll notice on here that a lot of the shadows on these droplets are sort of mid to light tone shadows. There's only the occasional one that you might see. And I'm going to put some earth tones onto this side. So I'm going to grab a little bit more, some alizarin. You know, I'm finding these days when I'm making shadows and stuff, I'm really trying to just kind of stick to the primaries. Honestly, I don't use black out of the tube anymore. I find I really would rather just any kind of shadow I make, I want to use color. I want it to have a color to it. And I always remember a workshop I took with Jerry Markham about 5 years ago that he always said, look at the color you're doing and ask yourself, which primary is it? Is it red, a reddish color? Is it a bluish color? Or is it a yellow color? And, you know, it took a long time before that finally sank in, that I thought, yeah, you know, like, that's true. It's like, and what are those colors doing in relation to each other? Right? Now you see the shadows on these droplets are going to be dark because the darkness of these droplets is reflecting the darkness of the forest behind them, right? So I'm trying to be sympathetic to the form in which the droplet sits in front of. So these kind of droplets I'm doing here are going to be radically quite different from the droplets that I end up doing in front of these incredibly bright headlights. They're going to be a totally different ball game. So it's a crude example, but that's kind of the idea, is it's all sort of about finding the color. And am I holding this? Everybody can still see?
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Okay, I realized I was kind of moving it a little bit. I was hand talking and just didn't want to be moving it out of the sight of people.
It's remarkably good.
Well, thank you.
Like, you'll be able to see it and figure out your setup because you can watch the video.
Yeah, yeah. I can say, okay, next time I'll do that differently. And I'll try to remember where I put the photo. And that was kind of embarrassing. Got to load up with medium because this is, again, this is a very rough surface. There might be a rivulet or two in here somewhere. And I had a happy little rivulet. And I try and remember that, you know, lines have expression to them. The direction they're going, if they're going down, they might have a certain emotion about them, depending. So I'm trying to just kind of distribute some dark droplets around and add a few shadows in here and there.
So do you watch a lot of Bob Ross videos?
I used to when I was a kid. I loved him.
I've heard people who are not even artists, they just watch him for therapy to
Yeah.
help them fall asleep or
There's
relax
something
or
about his
whatever.
voice. I know I'd
Yeah.
fall asleep watching him. I just can't believe that he used to be a drill sergeant.
Oh, did he really? Oh, I didn't
Apparently
know-
he
didn't
did.
know
Yeah, he
that.
was in the army and he developed his speed because he'd go home for lunch and he'd get like a half an hour lunch and he'd go home and he'd whap out 2 paintings during his lunch hour. That's apparently how he developed his speed.
I'm sorry, but I have to go. And I want to tell you how much I enjoyed this. Thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm really glad.
Can you remind us again what sprayer that was that you were using?
My airbrush, you mean?
Yeah.
Iwata Eclipse, which is spelt Iwata,
Yeah.
and it's an Eclipse, which is the model for that is Hpcs.
All right.
And it's you know, if you're starting out doing airbrush, I recommend it. It's been a real workhorse for me. Just really wonderful to work with. Forgiving, I found. You know, just once I learned the hang of cleaning it, I found it was overall really it was really good to me.
And then do you buy that with the compressor or do you have to buy that separately?
You buy it separately. I bought the compressor and the airbrush together. How much was it? It was about $1,000 to $1,200 for compressor, airbrush, and about $300 worth of colors included in that. Golden, it was golden. So probably it was, yeah, probably about $1,200 to $1,200 to get started.
And what kind of compressor have you got?
It is called, it's an Iwata Studio series. And let me just see, it has something else written on the side. Ah, it's a smart jet.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'd love to see more people getting into airbrush.
Yeah, it looks absolutely super cool.
I got invited by Opus in Kelowna to do a demo for their staff at the end of this month. So that was really
great.
nice.
Oh, at the end of this month. So will you send out a reminder about that or give us the date?
Sure. They told me, tentatively speaking, it would be the last Wednesday of April.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that actually the public could attend it. Right now, it's how they outlined it is that it would be great if I could train some of the staff on how to use it, but it would be nice if a wider audience could come and see too, because I think it could be a lot more accessible of a medium if there was a little bit of education, especially for the staff that sell this kind of stuff. I mean, I expressed a little bit of frustration in emails and conversations with Opus and with Iwata because, there were things I was finding out the hard way that nobody had really had the knowledge or thought to tell me. They didn't know, right? So how could they train me on a certain procedure, say for example. So I'm overall really pleased with how they treated me and how it came out. And I said, in one of my emails that there should be training for staff. And I think that's where they got the idea to ask me. As I said, it was ironic because I put the idea out there months ago that, I would like to come and teach a little bit of airbrush for people, and nobody ever got back to me. So, I think it's really a medium that should be taught a little bit more.
I studied graphic design and commercial illustration at Capilano College in North Vancouver.
Yeah.
In the late 80s, and airbrush was big then.
Yeah.
But commercial illustration was huge then.
Yeah.
More now, it's more just photos now. You don't usually see commercial illustration too much, but commercial illustrators use the airbrush quite a bit. So yeah, I was lucky to be able to learn that when I was in the program.
That's cool. Yeah, very lucky.
But I've never used it since because you need the compressor and you need the space and I was taught you have to have proper ventilation and all that.
That's good teaching, actually. I agree with that. I should slap myself on the wrist for not ventilating. Now I'm going to add a little bit of really bright highlights in some of these drops. Specifically orange, because that's what's going on right here is we got a lot of orange in the background. So what am I going to do with my drops? I'm going to make them transparent and therefore the same color that they're in front of. I'll put some of that up into the sky. Even some of the drops over here could have orange in them. It's possible. There's maybe for composition, balancing the color, maybe put a little bit over in here somewhere, a few places.
So how many galleries are you in now, James? How many
I'm
represent you?
I'm in 3. So I'm at Kurbatoff in Vancouver and Elevation Gallery in Canmore or Fernie. I don't know. I haven't talked to them in a while, but I think they opened up an operation in Fernie now, and I'm not sure if my stuff has been moved to Fernie or if it's in Canmore. And then there's Gibson Fine Arts in Calgary.
Wow. And did you approach them or did they approach you?
They approached me actually.
Wow.
And I have Instagram to thank for Kurbatoff finding me.
Oh yeah.
And I know the girl who owns Gibson Fine Arts. So in 2013, I parted with White Rock Gallery, and within a week or 2 weeks, I got a message from an artist friend saying that Patty Dipsky had been through town asking for me and where my address was. So I got in touch with her, and she asked if I'd be interested in being represented at Gibson's. So I've been with them since 2013. And then Elevation Gallery was later. That was 2018. So I've been with them for a while. And then Kurbatoff Gallery was early last year, about a year ago, actually.
Wow. So do you have trouble keeping up to 3 galleries at a time?
Yeah, well, like I haven't actually really contacted, or they haven't contacted me either. It seems like they're pretty busy with a lot of artists that they are supporting. And so I'm not really too worried about it. Like I think our relationship is probably fine. Like we haven't really touched base, and I'm planning to, but I'm learning that it's good to have kind of a long-term plan, and that when I go and talk to those galleries out in Alberta, I'll say, could we look at maybe some kind of a show in, say, a year's time? Like I'm learning that we kind of have to have more time frame for shows, especially if they're solo shows, right? And that entails between 15 and 20 pictures. You have to have time to produce those, right? So me working full time, I did a blog actually about it, doing something called a time audit of myself. So I audited my time. I looked at my life and I said, okay, I work 40 hours a week. What do I have left over besides my life, family, and things going on? And it worked out that I could realistically put about 2 hours a night from Monday to Thursday into the studio. And on weekends, I could probably do 4 hours on each day. And so that added up to about 16 hours a week. And then give or take during the time, depending on the time of year, it could be busier in that there could be family events coming up or family vacations. I have to consider that kind of stuff. And so when I tried sort of giving and taking, estimating, I came out with 570 hours till the rest of this year, till the end, to paint. And then subtract from that about 100 hours for writing, because I like to write about what I do, and about 100 hours to go on social media marketing, updating my website for new works that come out. And so that left me about 370 hours. And then what I did is I did a rough estimate of how long would it take me to paint a canvas, say 30 inches by 40 inches, say 15 or 20 hours. So then I started chipping away at 370 hours total with all these various sizes that I did kind of an educated guess on how long it's taken me in the past to do, based on sort of my methods and stuff. And I came out with 45 paintings that I should be able to do by December 31st. And so I may not live up to that, but for me, it's sort of a way of kind of quantifying a goal and sort of quantifying the time that I have in my life in any given year. And how can I make that work, right? I don't know. Did I ramble What was the question?
No, I can't remember.
That was very interesting.
Yeah.
Fascinating, and I'm sorry, but I almost have to interrupt and say we're almost out of time.
Oh,
Yeah, while you've been talking, I've been watching how this painting has changed. It's amazing.
oh, good.
Yeah,
Well,
those
I'm
drops
hoping-
are really popping out now. Wow.
Yeah, well, it's all just kind of values, like not too dark, not too light for the sky, especially. I find the sky is especially sensitive because if you go with these heavy-handed darks, it just doesn't look realistic. And but when you get into the forest and darker areas down there, you can really punch in your dark values. And then I didn't really get a chance to get into the light here, but you know, when you get into lights, you know, you could start with pure white, punching in a few areas of pure white, and you can either let it dry and go in later with the color. I can tint them with yellow, so it'll still have a really high value of pure white, but next to it, you can say lay down a little bit of yellow next to that white and a little bit of orange next to that yellow. And you know, it's amazing what your eye does when you step back and look at it. What your eye does the work. Our imaginations do all the work, right? You don't have to do that much.
I think we're all going to be playing now, whether we can do this or not.
I hope you'll try it. It's a lot of fun, and it's kind of a meditative thing. It's sort of like more than subject matter. It's kind of like a state of mind, or like an emotion. It's chasing a feeling, really, for me. So it's like, what is the feeling I get out of a picture that I'm doing? Is it doing it? Am I getting a feeling from it that hits home somewhere, right?
Wow.
So it's kind of yeah, it's kind of each one has its own character. Even if I go and repaint a different version of a picture, this was actually a 6-footer that I painted and sold at Kurbatoff last year. So this is the same photo that I used to do a 6-footer, 6 feet by 4 feet. So I thought there are a lot of things about the colors in this one that really attracted me, the greens and the oranges together, how they, you know, this right-hand side, how it blended from green to orange. Just things like that. And the droplets that they carried these bright, pure chroma colors of reds and oranges in them. And it was a good excuse that you could go in with those intense, pure colors and get wild with them and throw those on the canvas.
That's amazing. Does anybody else have any final questions that they wanted to ask before we have to say goodnight?
Excuse me, I wanted to ask about the really thick paint that I saw you use in one of the paintings. Like you put like dabs of really thick paint.
Yes. At one point I was trying for extreme contrast. So I was trying for like the soft blended fuzzy feeling of an airbrush, and then putting it up against a similar color, but monstrously put on, like with tons of heavy impasto. And I thought, let's try it. What would it look like? So yeah, there was a period where I was just using palette knife to trowel on this really heavy paint. And I find I come and go with that. I find there are times when I'm really attracted to the idea of thick impasto like that, but then I find I'm pretty clumsy with the palette knife sometimes. So the drops, if I only get a certain type of shape or a mark out of that one tool, then I've got to switch it up and try something else, because it's like a painting doesn't work if you try and make the same mark all the way across. It loses its interest to me. It has to have variety. So variety of mark making is important.
But how do you build up that paint? Like I've seen it sort of looked like they were like layers of that paint in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked really interesting.
Let's see if I have my palette knife here. I might be able to quickly show you. Excuse me one sec. I think I left it over here. Yeah. Okay. So, oops. So for example, let's see if I can quickly do it here. Okay, like let's look at this cluster in this photo here. Like what I would, sometimes what I would do would be to, I would take a few colors at the same time and load them onto the knife. So like load say white on there. And then maybe a little bit of pure red and pure yellow. And you can kind of get, you kind of play with the angle of the knife. And sometimes you maybe half mix it on the canvas too, right? Or just go in and grab more of a color. If it's too much white happening and you want to get back some of that chroma, because white by itself isn't good, it's just chalky, but you want the high values. So putting together a couple of colors at the same time on a palette knife is sort of that was an early technique that I was using. And then I found it took way too long to dry, especially with yellow. Yellow is like the single most prolonged pigment there is. I found like it takes weeks. But hopefully, does that answer your question?
Isabella?
Yes, it does. Sorry, I was muted and yeah.
Oh, it's okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, it looks like we're sort of at the end, James. I want to thank you so very much, like for
Thank you.
joining us.
It's a
And
pleasure.
yeah, and it's been amazing. So I imagine if they do allow people to come to the Opus, one eventually, that you might get a few more people coming in to watch again.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I will ask them that question. The next time I talk to Opus, I will ask them and see if the general public could come at all. I would really like that.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much again, and have a wonderful evening. And
Yes, thank
congratulations.
you.
Thanks, James. That was great.
Oh, good. I
That was
hope
just
you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yeah, it did.
Really a pleasure.